on. All right, brief pause and everything because I've been moving and life is just life. Today, though, this is going to be a fun one, I think, anyway. We're going to be
Yeah,
talking about how we can use technology to help us track and monitor wildlife.
which I'm excited about. And if you guys, whoever, if you're regular listeners and you've been listening, you know that we've partnered with Follow, who uses wildlife tech
Yeah.
to
A,
monitor
a lot of
wildlife.
it. Yeah, a lot of variety of it. So they because they partner with different organizations, they base off of whatever they're tracking based off of whatever those organizations are tracking, which is honestly a variety of a lot of these different ones. So, before we jump in, Laura, did you have nature news?
Yeah, but it's more like nature warning.
Depressing. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
okay.
I got sent it and I had seen this, but I didn't really want to look at it, but here I am looking at it. And this is in your neck of the woods. This is the
Uh-oh.
possible
Oh,
flesh-eating screwworm.
yeah, worms. Yep. Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So there is the New World screwworm, which is a flesh-eating larva of a
Ugh.
fly. It has been making the rounds through Central America and Mexico, and it's most recently been seen at least 25 within 25 miles of the US border, but now they think there might be a potential case that they're looking into in
Yep.
Texas.
Yep.
So, like any good maggot, these things the fly lays its eggs in a wound.
Oh,
Normally in animals, but sometimes in people. So yeah, screwworm detected in Mexico found in a 5-year-old goat. It's a parasite. It eats you.
yeah.
26,000 screwworm cases identified across Mexico.
Ah,
That's a
good
lot.
lord.
And apparently,
Yeah.
and I guess people are like, what's the big deal? Well, it can cause major issues if it's laid
Yeah,
in.
I mean, rightfully so.
Last year, the first case of a New World screwworm infestation in a human was confirmed in the US. He had returned to Maryland from El Salvador.
Like,
But
too close to home, too
fine,
cose to home. Yeah.
but in you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, keep your wounds closed. Screwworms out.
Ew. Ew. That's so gross. So gross.
All
All
right,
right.
with that, let's jump into technology.
Yeah, I guess they're not really tracking screwworms with any of this stuff other than, hey, whenever they visually see cases. Well, I guess maybe one of mine might. No, probably not. All right. I was hopeful there for a brief second. I can go first.
Cool. I'm ready.
Okay.
So we took different types of tech, not necessarily products, but overarching groups of tech to kind of talk about how they work,
We
what they
did.
use them for, right? I mean, you can
Wait, what was my group? Wait, did I have a group? I know we
no, well,
briefly talked about it.
it's like, are you doing products or are you doing more like
Oh, 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 oh.
things?
I was
And
like,
you were like, no, I'm not doing products. I'm doing like things.
things. Yes, I'm doing
So
things.
mine's like a group of, like, it's not
Things.
just cameras. It's specific. It's like a group
Yes,
of
yes, yes.
cameras.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay,
Okay. All right. Now that Laura and
Scared
I
ya.
have that out of the way, my first thing I guess I'm going to be talking about is radar, which
Okay.
again is most people I feel like overlook it unless you're a birder. And then we're constantly doing migration, looking at all this stuff.
Or you're like
So,
a yeah, 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 radar. You're right. I guess because everyone's heard of radar, but I don't even know if people know
yes.
how it works.
No, nope. Okay, so if you've ever pulled up a weather radar map and seen the blobs, colorful blobs hanging out, isn't that supposed to be a storm? Most cases it is, but not all the time are those blobs weather at all. A lot of times they can be animals, and not just a few animals. We're talking like thousands, sometimes millions
To
across the
make a
sky.
cloud.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a cloud. Yeah, because it has to be a lot. We did our swarmed episode a while
Yes.
back, and that one, the locusts and stuff, definitely picks up on radar. So, weather radar has been around for decades. The modern Doppler weather radar network that most Americans are familiar with today began rolling out in the 90s, which is crazy to think because that wasn't all that long ago. But it's the one that we know of today, right? The
Yeah.
one that we picture today. And that came out through the National Weather Service's NEXRAD system. And more than 150 radar stations now scan the skies across the United States every few minutes. Meteorologists use it to track rain, hail, snow, severe storms. But over the years, they kept noticing odd signals mixed in with the weather data, strange patterns, unusual movements, echoes that didn't quite behave like storms. And eventually, scientists realized, like, huh, I wonder if. And they started realizing that it was birds, bats, insects. And
This just got brought up, like, 2 weeks ago when I was talking with people about bats, because somebody I
oh,
knew went
yeah.
to, like, the Carlsbad Caverns, and I was like, "Oh,
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like, so many freaking bats come out at night
Yep.
that it
Yep.
shows
A
up on
lot of them.
radar."
Yeah, a lot. And scientists have honestly, this isn't a new phenomenon, right? I said the Doppler radar that we know of today has been around since the 90s. But again, Doppler radar has been around for quite a while. And scientists have been noticing the mysterious, I don't know, biological blobs since at least the 40s. So during World War II, radar operators sometimes would pick up strange targets that they couldn't explain. And most of the time, it turned out to be flocks of birds. So, how does that happen? Well, Doppler weather radar works by sending out pulses of radio waves into the atmosphere. Those waves travel outward until they hit something. Then, some of that energy basically bounces back to the radar station. And that's how meteorologists can tell where rain is falling, where hail is forming, and whether a storm might be rotating. And if you ever look, I'm the nerd who has the radar apps, and it shows all the different types of radars that can show debris and altitude. So there's all kinds of different breakdowns of radar that we have nowadays, way more complex. So here's the thing though that about radar, it doesn't really know what it's hitting. It just knows it's hitting something. And so that's left up to then scientists, meteorologists to say, hey, this is like, we know something is being reflected in the signal. And then just looking at it and they study it and then they're like, oh, this is what it is. So basically think about standing in a dark room shouting for echoes, and whenever you're listening for those echoes, you might be able to tell like something is out there, human echolocation without it being a human echolocation, but you don't necessarily know precise direction or
Specifics.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure this is where, like, AI computer modeling comes in, right?
oh yeah, it
Like,
totally can. Once scientists realized that animals were showing up on the weather radar, they started noticing some of the strange behaviors and patterns. On clear evenings, enormous clouds would suddenly appear on radar and begin moving across the landscape. Sometimes radar stations would detect giant rings that seemed to expand outward from a single point, which would be terrifying to see on a radar whenever
yeah.
you're like, is it gonna rain tonight? And it's like, bleh, like you don't know what the heck that's coming from, right?
That's
Other
some
times there
witch
were broad
nonsense. Yeah.
no, right, right. Another time there were broad waves of movement crossing entire regions, despite the fact that there weren't any storms nearby. And once researchers kind of figured out what to look for, the culprits became pretty obvious. It was birds leaving their nighttime roosts, bats emerging from caves, even massive swarms of insects, like I talked about briefly earlier, taking advantage of favorable weather conditions, the locusts that need to fly and be able to breed and mate. So, one of my favorite examples, though, comes from right here in Texas. And if you've ever seen the footage of Bracken Caves, the bats pouring out of the caves at sunset, you know it's insanely, insanely oppressive. So, at Bracken Caves, it's right outside of San Antonio, Texas, an estimated 15 to 20 million Mexican free tailed bats emerged during the summer, making it one of the
Many
largest
bats.
or the largest colony of concentrations of mammals on Earth. When those bats leave the cave at dusk, weather radar definitely picks up that cloud and expansion of every single night whenever it's going out, which is crazy. And totally look up video footage of it.
Yeah. I have one that's gonna follow up so perfect with this one.
Okay, good. So the biggest reason, other than bats, because you guys all know I just like things that fly, really.
Freaking
How,
bats.
dude, I love bats. The other way, and that's what I was saying, birders use it. Okay, is systems that could track migration across entire regions over real time. So it
Mhm.
does help with conservation efforts. So during fall migration, spring migration, scientists can measure the number of birds, where they are, and the peak migrations at night, and how they're moving across North America all at the same time.
Yeah,
And
and we can see how that shifts over time with climate change and stuff like that.
all kinds of things, yeah. And again, as the sun sets, like you'll notice it. If you go to birdcast dot is it org? Is
I
it
can't
org?
remember, but birdcast, yeah.
Yeah, if you go to Birdcast, just Google it. They'll show you like, hey, this is whenever the peak migrate for birding. This is whenever the peak migration is supposed to hit, and you can see as the sun goes down. There's like the band that'll go across, be like sundown, and then it'll be like whoa, 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 and it's like a heat map,
Yes,
and it just heats up, and they can predict that from this radar. It's kind of like rush hour traffic, but overnight, because that's when birds are going to be
totally.
moving the most. So, once scientists again realized that the radar could track animal movement, it suddenly became a powerful conservation tool. Researchers can identify major migration corridors, track changes in migration patterns over time, and even predict when large migration events most likely occur. And that information can help answer some really important questions, especially down here in Texas, how big development is and how fast development is expanding. So, but they're looking for things like, are birds arriving earlier than they used to? Are migration routes
Yeah,
changing? Which habitats are most important for animals to stop and rest, like McGee Marsh? That's how they figured out, wow, this is real and really important before they make that leap over the Great Lakes. They go ahead and they stop off at McGee Marsh. And that's kind of like, I would say, the big takeaway here is, yeah, we can talk about bird conservation all we want, but radar has really helped us to figure out where they are and
yeah,
where
like
they're
looking at those
congregating.
patterns.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
being able to see, oh, hey, this is important protected lands. And so for decades, millions of birds, bats, insects, and everything have been flying through those radar beams every single night. Necessarily didn't realize what they were looking at first, but once we figured all of that out, it ended up being a really powerful conservation tool. So something that most people don't think about is just weather radar, but picking up everything else: birds,
picking
bats,
up animals.
insects. Yeah,
Well, mine follows up perfectly with that because I was gonna talk about LiDAR,
nice, very good.
which I actually hadn't even heard of the term, but I totally know it. Like, once I've described it, I'm like,
Really?
"Oh, yeah." S
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, so it stands for
See,
light detection and rating.
I do it with all the
Light
GIS stuff, like, cause that goes normally
Oh,
goes
okay,
hand in
yeah, yeah,
hand with
yeah.
GIS stuff, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So light detection and ranging. So it's a remote sensing device that uses lasers to create 3D images. It's very similar to radar, but instead of using sound, it's using lasers. So here's how it works. The device, whatever device this is, they can be big or small, just depends on what it is. The LiDAR device sends out tons, thousands to millions of laser pulses every second. The lasers bounce off of an object, and the machine then measures how long it takes each laser pulse to come back, which allows it to calculate distance very accurately. And since it can determine distance, it can then generate a precise 3D map. So, I said, basically sonar or radar, but with lasers. The images are made up of dots because these are indicating all the individual laser points. So, the image that it makes is often called a point cloud, and so it looks a little bit weird, but it definitely creates this 3D map.
Yeah.
And it's used in it's used in things like not conservation, it's used for cars to detect lane changing stuff apparently.
Mhm.
And like you were saying, it's used in GIS to do topography stuff.
Yep.
In
We
conservation, it
we
has a
we
couple
use
different.
it we use it in the water utility industry they're starting to really expand on it for finding leaky pipes, because
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
we can't just constantly digging up pipes all the time, you know what I mean? And so to be able to
Yeah.
scan and see where those leaks actually are, it's been super beneficial, saving
Yeah,
millions
that's
of
cool.
gallons. Yeah.
So in conservation, which of course you were just saying, that's water conservation. But
Yep.
otherwise, it was first used in forestry about 20 years ago. But applications for that quickly grew. But with forestry, it was used originally to measure canopy height, canopy density, and canopy coverage. So used in the plane,
Yeah,
shooting
yeah, yeah.
down these lasers to measure all the tree stuff.
Okay,
And
pause. Okay, pause. We've talked 1,000 different times about how animals see different things and layers of light than what we do. I wonder if it's like a rave. Like if animals can pick it up and they're
imagine.
like boop 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 boop,
Yeah.
like every night.
Just sandstorm playing in the background.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Or just like you're out of nowhere and then or you know how movies
Yeah.
or like in movies, you know how sees their friend just has a red dot on their
Yes,
chest? The
yes.
squirrels are like,
Whoa!
"Holy!"
Yeah. Because they
'Cause there's
see
so
it and no
many
one
of
else,
them.
right?
Hopefully they can't.
Yeah, right? Jeez.
It can create terrain models and measure landscape features such as slope, which is really good for modeling water flow, flood risk areas, and soil moisture content. And now It can be used to determine habitat quality and vegetation structure, which is a primary determinant of habitat quality for a lot of different species. So if you can determine the vegetation of an area, you can kind of get a good idea for if it's good or not for animals to live there, because obviously they need a food source and a place for
Yeah.
shelter.
Yeah.
Um, so and things like how much standing dead wood is there, how much understory and shrubs, how much is actually trees. So now with the lasers, it's so sophisticated that it can do more than just tell how high a tree is. Now it can get all the way down to the
Yeah.
bottom
Yeah.
and like just what kind of resources are there. It can also be used to create estimates of carbon stock. So where are the areas that are doing carbon sequestering based on topography? It can measure changes over time and how habitats have changed. Bathymetric LiDAR can be used through bodies of water, so lasers that can
Mm.
do the same thing to make ocean floor maps and coral reefs. And then finally, which I also thought was crazy, newer LiDAR can even measure the differences in chlorophyll levels, helping to distinguish deciduous. Oh my gosh, that's a whole sentence. Okay.
Glad
It
you're
can
reading
be
it, not
used
me.
to detect whether something is deciduous or coniferous. I don't know why I can't say it today. But anyway, it can detect how green. How green is it? That's got to be a
That's pretty
deciduous
cool.
tree. That's got to be
Yeah.
an evergreen tree.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so then again, we can really look at habitat. And it's better than a camera, right? Because a
Mm.
satellite is just taking a flat image. It is not
Yeah.
revealing anything underneath the canopy of a forest.
Yep.
Like you see the trees and that's it. The lasers are actually so tiny that they can go between leaves and twigs so it can see the vegetation on the forest floor where a satellite just could not do that.
That's crazy.
Um so yeah, LiDAR, very similar uses to yours, but very much focused on topography and vegetation and using lasers.
That's pretty cool. Alrighty, I don't really have a really good segue into this next one. It's like the environmental DNA that's left behind. So like
Oh,
CIS, right? Like wildlife CIS.
okay, okay.
So again, I mean there's a lot of
Because you're like, I was
science.
like, how is that tech? Oh yeah, duh. They're
It
like
is.
analyzing it.
Yes, yes, yes. And trying to figure out. If you're looking at an area and you're trying to figure out if a certain animal has been through there, you can either catch it, photographic evidence, hear it calling, see it with your own eyes. It's fairly limited until we started being able to really collect and analyze DNA. And I think people forget that us being able to really dive into and really figure out DNA is not all that old, the past 20-ish years. It's fairly recently considering, I don't know, how old some of this other stuff is that we're talking about.
Yeah.
It allows scientists then to be able to, I don't know, confirm that if animals are there without any other clues around, like no camera
Yeah.
traps, no nothing.
Or like
So
with certainty, right? Because you could find fur, and I'm pretty good. I could probably tell you maybe two or three animals that could have left that
have
fur,
been,
but I
yeah,
wouldn't know with certainty unless you did the DNA sampling.
yeah,
Plus,
and
the
not
DNA can tell you like male. I mean, like it can tell you
exactly
so much.
everything. Yeah, like
Yeah.
everything. So it's not only just a picture of, oh yeah, that's a raccoon. It can basically tell you everything about that raccoon. That raccoon doesn't even know about that raccoon kind of situation. So, while this all might sound kind of more science fiction, researchers have been using this technique since, again, I don't know, just before 2010 is whenever in wildlife it really started kicking off. In fact, one of the earlier studies that helped launch the field of eDNA was published in by French researcher Pierre Tabaret and his colleagues, showing that DNA left behind in the environment could be used to detect species without directly observing them, which is crazy because
It's like a
like
no duh though,
it is,
too.
yeah. But
We
again, if
couldn't
you,
prove it.
yeah, we
Yeah.
couldn't prove it because you think too about crime scenes, right? And everybody's look for DNA, but again, people forget that is a fairly recent thing. In the grand scheme of things, that's still
Or at
fairly
least
recent.
good DNA. Yeah,
Yes,
right.
good
Like,
DNA to be able to see, but to be able to look at that DNA and be able to tell you who that individual is, to be able to process it. And again, because that always would take priority, tracking wildlife was not a priority because why would it be? So every living thing leaves behind evidence. We know this, whether it realizes it or not. And because of the environmental DNA, we can collect it from skin cells, scales, feathers, mucus, saliva, urine, feces, literally anything and everything. And some of it lingers in the environment long enough for scientists to find it, and so they end up collecting it, like water from a pond, soil from a forest, sediment from a river bottom. And even more recently, they've started to be able to collect DNA, like molecules, like I don't wanna say floating in the air, but they've been able to yeah, but they've been able to take samples and you can see, like, the pollen and stuff in it, you know what I
Okay,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
And to be
yeah,
able to
yeah.
look at the DNA that way. So even stuff that you don't really think of quote unquote "DNA," they're looking at and pulling DNA from now, which is crazy. And again, because they can go ahead and bring those samples back to the lab, extract genetic material, you can basically find out from the DNA fragments anything and everything that you would need to know about that species. And here's an important distinction I think with all of this too is that the scientists aren't collecting animals. So they're collecting traces of the animals that they've left behind. And so it's a lot less invasive, it's a lot longer term. And again,
They're
it's
not
not like
darting it and collecting blood. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, which again, I
I mean,
mean,
sometimes, but
yeah,
not they don't have
sometimes,
to.
yeah. But yeah, you don't have to necessarily. Now, again, it's a matter of finding the DNA because it's like,
Yeah.
hey, do we have Fawks here? Now we got to find the
Yeah, I
possibilities
read
of where it could be.
one of the articles we had to read for grad school was talking about wildlife corridors and
Yes.
whether or not they were effective. I don't know if you had to read the same one, but it was about how they were using barbed wire fur traps to
Oh, yeah, yeah,
catch
yeah. Yep.
fur from different bear species.
Yep.
So a bar like wire, bear'd have to go under it, it snags the fur, then they would come and collect the fur and then do DNA analysis and they
Yep.
could find out, how many species, what species of bear, how
Yep.
many individuals, were they old, were they young, were they male, were they female? They could tell
In
everything and then they
relation,
could
in
see.
relation of between who's related to who. Is this like
Yeah.
a lineage?
Right,
Is
so they
this
were
yeah?
seeing, right, are they it was this is this highway making pockets of
Yep.
populations? How effective is the wildlife corridor? I mean, the applications for just this one study were so vast.
Yeah. So you brought up that example. So another one was even in 2011, there was a team led by David Gurday, I hope I'm saying that right. And they used environmental DNA to detect invasive Asian carp in waterways connected to the Great Lakes, which that was a really big deal. And so if you're not familiar with Asian carp, they're a group of invasive fish originally brought to the United States in the 70s. And since then, they've spread through much of the Mississippi River Basin, raised serious concerns about reaching the Great Lakes where they could disrupt native fish communities and commercial fisheries because a lot of people depend
Really
on that.
destructive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very destructive. And the challenge wasn't finding a few fish in a massive waterways, which is incredibly difficult as it is, but finding their DNA ended up being a lot easier because they could just collect water samples, test for traces of Asian carp DNA, and they could detect
Crazy.
whether there's evidence, yeah, that they were even there as, hey, if this is an area that we should start looking at or not. So that which again, that to me is mind blowing that you could take some pond water and talk about
Truly
everything that's in there.
CSI, right? Here's
Yeah.
our all right, we're their nature detectives.
Yep.
New age nature detectives, not
Yes.
trackers.
Yeah. Another aquatic example is the eastern hellbender, which I know we've talked about the hellbenders briefly before. The giant salamander, and then we kind of went off a tangent with the hellbenders. But they're giant aquatic salamanders that can grow up to nearly 2-ish feet. They're sometimes called snot otters, which I still think that's one of my favorite. Besides trash panda, snot otters is one of my favorite names. And the problem with hellbenders is they spend much of their time hidden beneath rocks and streams of rivers. Even if a population is healthy, they can be insanely difficult to find. And
So
how do you
camouflaged.
right? And how do
Yeah.
you find them? You have to go in, you have to flip up rocks, and they're very sensitive creatures.
Right, you're
And s-
ruining the stream as you're doing it. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So they're able to go ahead and go in and find and collect DNA samples, analyze it, and figure out all about the population's health, all kinds of stuff. So anyway, so yeah, so animal DNA, like this is one that we obviously know a lot about DNA. We because of all the advances within humans and looking at human genomes and all that. We just talked 2 weeks ago
Yeah.
about all of that, but like the animal side of stuff is I don't want to say it's lacking cuz it's not. It's just a little bit behind. So it's like we
So it
know
wasn't priority. Like you were saying, like
yeah.
we had to prioritize some stuff first, and then now
Yes.
the technology is so proliferous and so many more people have access to it.
Yeah, so it makes it a whole lot easier. It's just got to be one of these things of, hey, this is all the stuff we can use it for. Who would have thought to be, oh yeah, we can collect a sample and then find all the DNA just within a water sample kind of thing. You know what I mean? To figure out where the carp are. So there's really endless possibilities. I didn't even talk about all the examples that they're going in through jungles
With
and
the
search,
scat and like, yeah.
right? There's just tons of like good applications that we can leave these more sensitive areas a little bit more alone. Yes, we wanna still take pictures and things like that because it doesn't disturb them, but having all that DNA is insanely beneficial and just really cool. So the applications for that are definitely growing, and like Laura said, the more that people have access to these things, it's becoming, I don't know, like, more on the forefront of, "Oh, well, let's just look for DNA," rather than saying, "Well, let's go trap a bunch of them," and whereas like dart them, collect samples, it's completely different. So that really has changed the game of conservation, and eDNA is gonna continue to change, like, how we're studying animals for a long, insanely long time.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, my next one is also talking about something that's uninvasive is passive acoustic monitoring. It's something that
Ooh,
I'm weirdly into, and I
yeah,
have been ever since we got that bat echo meter when we
right?
worked at Little Rock.
So fun.
Um, so passive acoustic monitoring is using recording hardware combined with machine learning algorithms. So you're using portable, remote, weatherproof sensors that record sound. The recorders are non-invasive and usually camouflage because they want to be hidden, and they can be left for really long periods of time, collecting large amount of data over time. Then once the data is collected on the machine, it's usually analyzed with specific computer programming used like in tandem with that device, which can isolate the animal communication from the background noise and also identify patterns and species. So again, recorders, they're not new, but
Yeah,
recorders mixed with computer modeling,
yeah,
game changer.
yeah,
Um,
craziness.
because of what can be identified with patterns and things like that. So how is it used for conservation? It is a huge range of uses. It can track specific species, which is probably the main thing it's often used for. So it can detect and track the distribution, abundance, and even behavior of different species of wildlife. The behavior part is really cool because it isn't being influenced by human presence. If you were just passively doing it, you're not seeing the behavior, but you are hearing the behavior. So any kind of
Yeah.
communication you're hearing, and it can be done over really big areas all at one time. So let's say you wanted to monitor a population of, that had a really big territory like wolves. You could put a couple of different monitors around. They're
Mhm.
constantly recording this data. You don't have to have scientists out there for long periods of time over
Yeah.
big distances.
Yeah.
Um, and it's especially useful when looking at endangered species or indicator species because endangered ones are hard to find, right? So you're saying it's much easier to do it when you're just passively grabbing DNA. This is just easier when you can just leave a monitor out there and hope it eventually finds this endangered species. And then indicator species are ones that presence or absence indicates something about the environment. If they're there, it's good. If they're not there, it's bad. So
Yeah.
if all of a sudden, you've been hearing frogs in this area this whole time, if you stop hearing frog song on your recorder, there's an issue. So it's analyzing habitat health and not just one specific species. We're also talking about soundscape ecology, which I think is such a cool
Which is so
term.
cool. Yeah.
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 So that's the sound of an entire area. So soundscape ecology, the living sound of of a whole area, and it's the relationship between living organisms, humans, and their environment. It's its own field of study. So it's looking at how much biodiversity is in there, like how many different sounds are we hearing? Is the sound changing over time? Does the sound change seasonally? What is all of this telling you? So it's just people's job to listen to sounds, and you can go online and
Crazy.
find different soundscapes of different places and then look at patterns over time. It's also really good at detecting illegal activity. So if you're recording and you're trying to find endangered species and all of a sudden you hear a chainsaw in the background, bam,
Yeah.
bust it.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Or
Yeah.
poaching, like gunshots. So all of that data they can then help with land and wildlife management decisions. If something's there, if not something's there. What's wrong with the
Hmm.
habitat? How's it changing?
Yeah.
Where should we do prescribed burns that will do the least amount of problems? Where should we be building houses? Not here because there's a whole bunch of animals. And it's, again, we've been saying with a lot of these, the tech is better than just doing it with visual monitoring. It's way easier to detect some species by sound than sight, like small things like frogs, birds, and bats. It's more cost effective than paying a biologist hourly.
Right.
Way less habitat disturbance. Allows monitoring to happen in multiple locations at the same time and creates a permanent record, which, like you were saying with the bird radar, we can all go birding and we can have our own mental clicked, remember that bird, but that's not a permanent
Yeah.
record that scientists everywhere can use. So this sound is a permanent record of that time and place. And so, with that in mind, I want you all after this podcast to go check out Wildlife Acoustics, which is a company.
Yep.
They have amazing products. Katie and I have both used them before at the zoo with that bat meter. But what's really
I used
cool,
them before that, and that's how I found
oh,
out
right,
about
when
it
you
at the
did
zoo
your
was, yeah, bats work in
in
Australia.
Australia.
Yeah, we used them
Yeah,
because we had such a variety of species that would come through that we had to do a census on all the different variety of species that were there because we didn't really know.
couldn't
So
see
that's
them.
what we,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so, but not only are their products cool, so if you're a scientist, you should definitely check them out. But just if you're a layperson who's interested, I have subscribed to their newsletter and they have free webinars regularly where scientists give talks on their projects that they used the monitors for. And I did one. The whole theme was Star Wars based, like the titles were Star Wars based, which was silly.
yeah,
But it was all of these cool different. One person was studying eagle owls over in Europe using them. And so they were talking about how they were using them in a quarry to determine where these eagle owls were nesting. And then somebody
yeah.
else was talking about how they were using them to do endangered frogs. So if you're just interested in that kind of stuff, free webinar, baby. So check out Wildlife Acoustics.
Very cool. Alrighty. I have one more. You have one more, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So the last one that I'm going to talk about, I don't know. I think I knew about this in concept, but I had no freaking clue on what it was or what it was called. So we open it up and we start talking about fallow. So some of these animals that places and organizations track, whales, think of the huge migrators, right? The
Yeah.
whales that are going from south to north, some albatross, some of the birds that are literally going from pole to pole every year migrating. How the heck do we really track those other than radar? Because radars have to have points, along that path and has to go out, touch, come back. Okay. But that's not really effective because then you would have to have points, the whole way. So how are we tracking those animals? It can't be a normal GPS call or radio tag because again, it's very short term and it's limited. So that's wherever the ICARUS program has come in. And
Icarus.
Icarus, thank
It's
you.
no, I only know that because of that's got to be that because it's the guy who flew too close to the sun.
Yes,
It's
yes,
probably
yes,
what
the
it's named
Greek
after.
guy. Yeah, the Greek
Yeah.
mythology. And it's not that, but that's where it comes from. And it stands for the International Cooperation for Animal Research Using Space.
What? I had never heard of such a thing. That's
Right,
cool.
right. The project was originally proposed by German zoologist Martin Wilinski, a researcher who has spent much of his career trying to understand animal movement and migration. His idea was simple. Animals are constantly collecting information about the world around them just by living their lives. But the challenge has with the huge migrators has always been figuring out how to follow them. So, working with researchers from the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior and a large international team of collaborators, Walensky helped develop a system that would eventually be installed aboard the International Space Station in 2018. Yep,
That's cool.
the basic concept is surprisingly straightforward. Scientists attach small electronic tags to animals that are way more
Mhm.
lightweight than radio collars or anything like that. They're solar powered and those tags can record all kinds of information, including location, movement, activity levels, temperature, acceleration, even. And
So is this
and
what they're like jamming like a stick? Is this the same thing as the tag? I've seen videos before of them tagging a whale with a stick and they stick something in it. Is
I
is
would
that
have
what
to
they're
see. I would have to see
okay, I'm just
exactly what
curious.
that is because some of them are just the old school, like
GPS
tracking.
stuff
Yeah,
or
yeah.
telemetry or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But this is way
From
different.
space. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, as that tag is collecting the data while the animal goes about its normal life, as the International Space Station passes overhead, traveling around the Earth roughly, 17,000 plus miles per hour, the station can then receive information about from those tags and relay it back to scientists. So it's almost
So
like,
cool.
yeah, so it's almost like a constant snapshot, right? So whatever the bird does, and I think I talk about it here in a minute, but it's
So
90
it's
minutes. Every 90 minutes,
I was just
the
gonna say
space
how
station
often.
can go around. So you figure every 90 minutes, it's like whatever the bird has done that last 90 minutes is collected in that tracker. And then as soon as
Yeah.
the International Space Station goes over top, it's like "Ba-doom," and it sends all that information up to them. And then you can
Yeah.
kind of like backtrack where they are to
Yeah.
predict where they're going, kind of thing. And so, why would scientists go through all the trouble putting wildlife tracking system on the International Space Station? Well, like I said before, scientists have been using tracking devices for decades: GPS collars, radio transmitters, satellite tags, even. And those tools truly have revolutionized wildlife research, but they also have limitations. Batteries only last so long, transmitting data takes energy. Many animals travel enormous distances across landscapes that are difficult or sometimes impossible for researchers to truly follow the whole way. And so that's where space becomes surprisingly useful. And so, because it circles Earth every 90 minutes, passing over huge portions of the planet, of course, it means that researchers aren't limited to tracking animals in one country, one region, or even one continent. They can follow migrations across international borders, animals moving across oceans, bird traveling thousands of miles between breeding and wintering grounds. And instead of studying one small piece of the journey, scientists can start to see the bigger picture of the whole because they don't have to, hey, let's track these birds as it goes through South America. And then next year, it's, well, let's take this middle journey. You know what I mean? Because you always had to kind of like split it up.
Smell
Where,
it.
yeah, where now it's, nope, let's just track it the whole way. And so once you start to see the whole journey, you start finding answers to questions that scientists have been asking for years. For example, researchers have used tracking technology to follow migratory cuckoos traveling between Europe and Africa. These studies have revealed important stopover location where birds rest and refuel during migration, which, like I said earlier, helps us to protect those hot spots of where they're going to relax. And researchers have also tracked fruit bats, moving across distances, like we said, whales, I mean, anything. And
So cool.
so, yeah, no, it is really cool. And so here's the part though where Martin Wachowski, I hope I'm saying the last name, who knows, and many other researchers have found really exciting is that scientists just aren't just learning about animals, they're learning more and more about the earth itself because animals are constantly responding to changes in the environment. So storms, droughts, wildfires, habitat loss, changes in food availability. So the animals aren't studying the environment per se, they're living in it, which sometimes makes them to be the first ones to notice change. And so the scientist and his team at his university have been describing animals as
Of
living
observers.
like environmental
Yeah, yeah.
sensors, but because they're the ones that are like if a flock of birds suddenly changes migration route, there has to be a reason for that, right?
Yeah.
And so they can go back and study and see, okay, why is it shifting? Why is it doing this versus that? So it's not just a snapshot of the animal, which is extremely important, or that flock or that like big group. It's also helping us to see like major changes in the earth too, which is really, really cool.
So your tech was looking at the big picture. Mine is going to be looking up close and personal. So we're going to end it on animatronic spy cameras because I
Very
just think
cool.
they're so cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
um, also known as spy creatures. Probably most well known from the Spy in the Wild series on PBS. If
Yes.
you
I was
don't
gonna
know it,
say it's
you should
really
watch it.
yeah, if anything, it is so funny. For
Yeah,
me, this is by far the funniest one.
because
Like,
it's all right. How are we going to get up close and personal with these? So
yeah,
we've done passive monitoring. This is as active as you can get without dressing
right?
up in a suit, right?
Yes.
This is we want to be there in the action. No passive monitoring. Trying to be as non-invasive as possible, but
But
um
yeah.
so these animatronic spy cameras are robotic devices that mimic both the appearance and behavior of real animals in order to record wildlife in their natural habitat. So what does that look like?
For me, that's what makes it so much funnier because it's like obviously to a human eye, you're like, what the heck is yeah, it's just really funny. You guys gotta
And just
watch it.
imagining what the animals are thinking, right?
Right?
Because do they actually think it's one of them, or they just think that guy's got issues?
Yeah,
You know what I
right?
mean?
Like, yeah.
Like,
Is it like
oh, that's
Yeah.
just Fred.
Is it
He's a little
Becky?
different.
Is it Becky
Yeah,
from
yeah, the
Finding
loon.
Finding Dory, or is it
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. They're just like, that one's just a little
a
different.
little off? Yeah, a little off.
Well, so scientists have to have a conversation of like, first they got to decide on a species. And then once they do decide on a species, the designers need to create a creature that looks like that species, can function in that environment, and can obtain their desired video and audio. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
There is,
It's a
yeah.
pretty complicated process. So as to look the part, sculptors make the model, skin fabrication experts make the external structures, and animatronic and robot designers create the internal movement structures. So it's a lot of design and engineering and art going into this.
Yeah.
Then it has to act like the real animal. It needs to swim, walk, crawl, whatever, depending on the environment that it lives in. And I'll talk about more in a minute of how that's done. But for example, one of the examples that I was reading about is they made one that was a gorilla, and they made it so that it would avert its eyes from the silverback
Yeah.
to show, and they did a hippo that wiggled its ears to show that it wasn't a threat. So it's like gotta act like the animal.
It's just like
Don't
please
mind me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be able to, and it has to be able to record stuff. The whole point of it is being a camera. So it's got to have a camera, and usually it has microphones too.
Yeah.
And it has to work remotely because, again, this is an Ace Ventura with the rhino.
Yes. Yes. And again, I'm not knocking PBS because it is a really interesting show, but the length and effort that you go to for this, you know what I mean, to make this happen is just insane. The amount of effort that goes into it. Continue.
So much.
Yeah.
And so these engineers, called puppeteers when they're doing this, so the puppeteers control the movements from afar. These animatronic engineers consult animal behavior specialists to know what to do, right? Because they're not necessarily animal people. They're engineers or artists. So they have to be in a partnership with these scientists. So they like consulted a great ape specialist to be like, how do they move? Tell us everything about behavior because we have to be convincing.
Crazy.
Yeah, because it's super complicated.
Yeah.
So the audio and video that these spy creatures capture is instrumental in understanding species-specific behavior. So as corny as it is,
it works.
Gaining quite a bit of insight. It works.
It works.
So the more we understand about a species and how it fits into the ecosystem, the better scientists can make these informed decisions on how to manage and conserve that species and the surrounding ecosystem.
Yeah.
It can provide insight into habitat loss, poaching, and other conservation issues while they're filming. So again, if they're filming and they notice illegal activity or somebody tries to take out one of these poor little animatronic spy animals.
Right? Imagine you come up across the gorilla in the wild, like a poacher. You'd be like, what, like so confused.
Or one of these little guys just ends, all of a sudden a black bag goes over the head of whatever this camera is. The puppeteer's like, what the? You know, it's been creature napped.
Yeah.
And so why these cameras? Not just a regular camera, not just a person dressed up or just a scientist walking up to the group. It isn't passive like a camera trap. So a puppeteer can deliberately follow, investigate, or try and observe specific animals and their behavior. It's not just, oh man, the deer wandered past the camera. This is like, we're following the deer, right? You can actively monitor.
We're blending in, guys. We're blending in.
Smile and wave, boys. Smile and
wave. Yeah.
And you can capture behaviors that might otherwise literally never be seen. It can record in areas that can be dangerous or difficult for humans, not just the environment, but political instability. Send in the robots, right? You can't actually send in the scientists. Species like hippos, too dangerous or nocturnal, right?
Yeah, right.
You know, nobody wants to get that close. And these high-tech robots are really appealing to a wider audience of people, connecting people with wildlife that might not normally be interested. It's hard not to make a connection with these silly little animatronic creatures. Like you're invested, you know?
Yeah.
And the footage that they get, it's so special and so close. It feels like you're right there. And again, it provides that emotional connection. So this is really good for documentaries.
Yes.
If you want people to care about wildlife, this is the kind of footage that you need.
Well,
you're in there.
This is...
You're seeing the behavior. You're seeing the mom taking care of the baby.
Yeah.
You're there with them.
Well, it's more. You said it a few minutes ago. Like it's drastically more appealing to a broader audience where everything that you and I have talked up until this point, like
Yeah.
we geek out on
Cool.
it because it's really
Yeah.
cool, but this kind of stuff hits everybody else who normally isn't deep diving into all this stuff and
Right.
appreciate it,
This
maybe of all that
sells the
other stuff.
conservation. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But
Yeah.
you need
This
that. You need that.
right. People need to make emotional connections to care.
Yep.
And if that's the way it's got to be done, then that's the way it's got to be done. So if a person is like, I need funding for this species, if they can get footage of that species and make people care about them, that can translate to
Yeah.
funding and other things. And then they can use the other tech that we've talked about to do their
Dude, yep.
research. But first, they
Yeah.
need the money.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's animal technology. That was a fun one. I at least
Yeah,
had
because I
fun
wanted to do
researching that
something
one.
that, like, I didn't want to do telemetry, like things that
Yeah, the
are
normal
older
stuff.
or that we know a lot about. Yeah, this was just
Yeah.
different. I learned some cool stuff.
Yeah. Some very different stuff. All right, guys. Well, that is all for this episode. We'll have another short episode, mini episode next week. Until then, go check us out on Patreon. I've been trying to post a little bit more like long content on, edited as much content over there too. So go check that stuff out, and we will talk to you next week.
Later.